Hello and welcome to this episode of Mindset Mentoring for Athletes, Families, and Entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Coach Chuck, and today's guest has an extraordinary story of resilience, achievement, and advocacy in the face of great adversity. He is not only a pioneer in mental health treatment, but also a living example of how mindset can help us rise above life's hardest challenges. So stay tuned for that.
Welcome to Success Institutes, where we turn potential into achievement. Are you ready to transform your mindset and unlock your true potential? We are experts at guiding teenagers, families, athletes, and entrepreneurs to break through limiting beliefs and release negative emotions, empowering them to adopt a champion's mindset. Do you feel like you have more potential to unlock, but something is holding you back from reaching it? Or do you feel that about your teenager, teen, or business? At Success Institutes, we understand these challenges. Our Mindset Transformation Training and 10-week Transformative Habits Integration Program are designed to help you overcome unconscious obstacles, foster a growth mindset, and build habits that allow you to become a master of your mindset and a master of your life. Our foundational programs offer practical tools and strategies to shift from a mindset of defeatism to one of unstoppable success. Imagine gaining clarity, confidence, and the habits needed to reach your goals and enhance your well-being. Whether you're an athlete striving to reach new heights, a student pushing for academic success, a parent balancing your teen's needs with your own challenges, or an entrepreneur looking to unlock your full potential and that of your team, we are ready to support you every step of the journey. Discover how our tailored programs can help you break barriers and build a future full of possibilities. Ready to take the first step towards transformation? Visit successinstitutes.co and schedule a discovery call with our team today to learn how you can shift your mindset, overcome challenges, and achieve your dreams. Success begins with the right mindset. Contact us now to start your journey to greatness.
Welcome back. Our guest today is Dr. Muhamad Aly Rifai, a globally recognized multi-board certified psychiatrist, internist, and addiction medicine specialist with more than 25 years of experience at the cutting edge of mental health care. Dr. Rifai has been a pioneer in telepsychiatry, ketamine treatment, brain stimulation, and digital mental health innovation. He trained at the National Institutes of Health, where he studied the brain's chemical pathways and contributed to groundbreaking research on ketamine and psychedelics. In 2006, he launched one of the nation's first emergency telepsychiatry programs, a visionary move that saved countless lives, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. But perhaps his most powerful story is one of resilience. In 2022, he faced a wrongful indictment by the U.S. Department of Justice for his early telehealth work. 2 years later, in a landmark trial, he was fully acquitted, emerging as a national voice for physician resilience, justice, and ethical reform in healthcare. He has shared his journey in his book, Doctor Not Guilty, and continues to lead as CEO and chief psychiatrist at Blue Mountain Psychiatry, mentoring the next generation and advocating for innovative and passionate mental health solutions. It's my honor to welcome Dr. Muhamad Aly Rifai to the show.
Dr. Muhamad Aly Rifai is president of the Lehigh Valley Psychiatric Society. He says mental health insurance continues to be a problem.
We're still battling with many patients who find out that they have no mental health services and no mental health benefits through their insurance policies.
Dr. Rifai says insurance reimbursements for mental health providers can be painfully low, particularly with Medicare. Some people in the field choose not to deal with it.
More than 50% of psychiatrists who are practicing in the United States do not take insurance.
Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Today, we welcome back Muhamad Aly Rifai. He is a psychiatrist and internal medicine physician. Today's Kevin MD article is When Rock Bottom is a Turning Point, Why the Turmoil at HHS May Be a Blessing in Disguise. Muhamad, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me to talk about this timely topic about the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Thank you very much for having me today. It's a pleasure, Coach Barnard, Coach Chuck, to be on your show and to talk to your audience and tell them a little bit about my story and hopefully inspire the next generation into public service and into advocacy, as well as promote resilience.
Well, it's an honor to have you on the show, and I love all the work that you've done and your story of resilience, facing down the government and coming out on top. So I love all that. Why don't we start though at the beginning and try to just have you introduce yourself, a little bit about maybe your upbringing, and then we can kind of get into the meat of the conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. So. My story is an international story. So my family is originally from Syria, from the northern part of Syria, Aleppo, Syria. I'm from an immigrant family. A lot of my family members actually immigrated to the United States in the 50s and 60s. And my family immigrated to the United States in the 80s. I was young at that time, but I grew part of my life in Syria. And maybe your audience doesn't know, but there was a civil war in Syria in the 80s, and difficult circumstances. And I was exposed to fighting and machine gun fire and almost lost my life during those times, which basically led my family to immigrating to the United States in the late 80s. I've always been somebody who's was able to overcome adversities. Even early on in my life, I had significant adversities. In 1986, when I was only 14, I developed a significant illness. Nobody knew what was going on with me, and it wasn't known what kind of illness I had. And it was by the grace of the Lord and divine intervention that I was referred to a physician and an endocrinologist in Memphis, Tennessee, where my family lived. And he discovered that I was experiencing thyroid problems, and those were related to the nuclear fallout from Chernobyl. He was able to trace in my body some of the radioactive iodine isotopes that became airborne after the nuclear Chernobyl disaster, as I lived at that time in northern Syria, and some of the fallouts were in that area. By the grace of God, I was able to be treated, and I recovered, but I was on death's door, even as a young child. And subsequently to that, after I entered medical school, I actually worked with the doctor who saved my life. He's a famous endocrinologist. He's also a physicist. He was part of the group of scientists that promoted the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the International Treaty on banning nuclear tests, because he was able to show that nuclear tests cause significant damage with fallouts and radioactive isotopes that would harm people. But that was one of my first encounters with medicine, and this is why I decided to enter medical school. Throughout my medical school, it was very, very active work, and I did a lot of research. But that, just to inspire your audience, sometimes you can turn around a a traumatic experience into something that's productive and showing resilience.
Yeah, I love that. And here in the West, I don't think we fully can appreciate or understand sometimes the the everyday challenges, stress situations that some people grow up with. You said you were in Syria at the time of the Civil War, and uh, I remember you saying a story about that one time about the violence and I was wondering if you could speak to that. There was something about being on a bus or two busloads of children,
Sure, sure.
and
Yeah,
yeah,
it was a traumatic experience. I still remember it. It's still in my memory. So this was 1981. I was 8, and I was on a bus, school bus, going back home. It was a school bus for the elementary school kids and a school bus for the middle school kids and the high school kids, and that was ahead of us. And there was some shootings in that area where members of the military were killed, and they some of their comrades really got mad, and they wanted to take it out on the population. And the bus ahead of us was stopped, and it was older kids, high school kids, and middle school kids. And to take it out on the population, the mad soldiers just lined up the kids and shot them with machine gun fire. And it was us, the younger kids. It was our turn. But if it wasn't for a divine intervention and providence that they decided to spare the younger kids. But I still have memories of that with older kids being lined up and being shot with machine gun fire. So, and you being next, you're seeing that you may be next on the to be plowed with machine gun fire.
yeah, that story. Every time when I hear you share it, it moves me because I working with teenagers and working with kids, knowing what that can do for a child. But that, and then when you were 14, you're facing that life threatening illness, you got saved from that. That sort of resilience, human beings are resilient, but yet oftentimes people, teenagers, adults, just they get overwhelmed by that stress and can't they don't cope well, right? They succumb to it. I've got several questions around that, but first, one of the ones I have is those experiences. Did that play any sort of your motivation for the psychiatry field? Did that influence that decision, do you think? And did that play into your own inner healing?
Yes, yeah. So absolutely, absolutely. One of the other things that people don't know is Aleppo, Syria, which is my hometown in northern Syria, is actually the home of one of the first inpatient psychiatric hospitals in the world. It was built in 1475, and basically. There was very little known about psychiatric illness at that time, but individuals who experienced depression, anxiety, and nervous breakdowns basically were kind of given rest, vitamins, herbs to calm them down, and basically they were kept in that inpatient psychiatric hospital. And it is still a World Health Organization and a UNESCO site. That psychiatric hospital that was built in 1475 to house psychiatric patients. So that was one of the kind of my first encounters with the field of psychiatry. It's like, okay, this is where I come from. We've talked about how to help people cope with stress and psychiatric issues. I learned early on the power of meditation, the power of looking to higher power, how that influences your ability to cope with things, and basically prayer and meditation can be very, very influential in terms of helping people cope with stressful situations, and helping people kind of be able to gain some inner peace that would help them with resilience. Of course, in those days, there was no iPhones. There was no. We had the books, we had the power of prayers, and basically working on that was very, very important and very influential for me to be able to cope with things, and seeing that people have to pull through because we basically they had no other alternative but to pull through. So and maybe it was divine providence and divine redirection that prepared me for what was going to come later on in life, and that was those experiences are the ones that prepared me to be able to persevere and go through that experience in 2022 and being on trial.
Yeah, and I definitely going to want to kind of have you talk about that a little bit. But first, I'm also curious about the work. So, your family came to the United States. You were 14. You had that life illness, that real challenge there, and you finally decide to get into psychiatry, and then you end up going to doing work at the National Institutes for Health. And I was kind of curious about some of the things you mentioned with that, and some of the studies that you've done, and how that might have directed what you specifically were going to do later on with some of your psychiatry work.
Sure.
I was the brain stimulation kind of thing also fascinates me. The idea of doing some of that kind of work. You want to talk about those years briefly?
Sure. So what prepared me for those years were actually the research that I did during medical school. So my endocrinologist, the one who diagnosed me with this thyroid disease, his name is Dr. Lester Van Middlesworth. He passed at the age of 95 a few years ago. Continued to work until the day he passed. And basically what he did was continue to work on his passion, which is thyroid disease, and how to heal people from thyroid disease. Almost 5% of the world's population has some sort of a thyroid disease that impacts them. And thyroid is a gland that's here in the neck, but it's involved with producing energy and producing the thyroid hormone that helps people with energy and concentration and basically muscle strength. It was working in his lab, looking at what he did in terms of work, how he drafted these maps around the world of radioactive fallout, and how basically that work translated into his ability to advocate with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and basically be able to push countries to sign the banning on nuclear tests, on surface nuclear tests. I've also worked with some other researchers who were doing actually research on studying the neurochemicals in the brain. And that work is what prepared me to want to go to the National Institute of Mental Health in Bethesda, Maryland. But several years before that, also, I was funded by the National Institute of Health, also at the University of Tennessee, for 2 years to do research on studying the neurochemicals in the brain. So throughout my career, I've always been involved with studying how does the brain chemistry, how it is affected with adversity, with trauma, and how we can, to our best of abilities, prepare people to be able to cope with trauma, and how we can change the brain chemistry if trauma happens, that people would continue to lead a resilient and healthy life. And that's what led me to my work and my residency training at the University of Virginia, doing residency training in internal medicine and psychiatry. And again, I traveled to Bethesda, Maryland at the National Institute of Mental Health to continue my research on basically understanding the neurochemicals of the brain, as well as how we can change those neurochemicals in the brain and can give people the opportunity to live a healthy life.
That's all fabulous stuff, and I didn't study psychiatry, right? But my background came through neurolinguistic programming. I got my master's degree in special education, but it was based on behavioral stuff and timeline therapy and hypnotherapy and all these other fields. And I have read so much, and I'm fascinated by the whole brain and biochemistry, and we're learning more and more about the interaction between thoughts and biochemistry and things like diet and our gut biome and mental health and all those sort of connections. What are your thoughts on helping people learn to control their thinking patterns?
Sure.
And that's influence on the mental wellness of people.
Sure. So during my time at the National Institute of Mental Health, we studied how there is an interaction between the brain chemistry and behavior, as well as coping, and that research is still ongoing. We are still just scratching the surface in terms of our understanding what happens in the brain when somebody goes through adversity, what happens in the brain when somebody goes through trauma, what happens in the brain when there is depression or anxiety. And basically, the old explanations, we used to think that it was just related to neurochemicals. Most people understand or have heard about serotonin, for example, as something that's involved in depression and anxiety, as well as dopamine. These are things that are involved with pleasure and happiness. But now we know it's more than that. There are many, many, many other neurochemicals in the brain that are involved, that basically regulate our emotions and our feelings. And it's actually that what led me to working on additional neurochemicals. And we basically did the first testing on a neurochemical, which is an anesthetic. It's called ketamine. And we actually tested it for treatment of depression, treatment of anxiety, treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder, and it was successful. And since then, since 2004, it has been widely used to help people who are suffering from depression, who are suffering from anxiety, who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. We also discovered that we could expose the brain to a magnetic field that would stimulate those areas in the brain that are involved with difficulty in thoughts, with depression and anxiety, and help them with their resilience, their concentration, and their focus. And that's where transcranial magnetic stimulation was developed, which is basically a helmet that fits on the head and exposes the brain to a magnetic field, and that relieves depression and anxiety. And we have now evidence that it can also be utilized to help people with mental clarity, to help people with better concentration and focus, to help people overcome adversity, and to help people live just a healthier, happier life. So that's some of the research that I had started at that time, and that research continues, and we continue to use those modalities now actively to help individuals who are having depression and anxiety and life stress. And I continue to provide those services to my patients as well as to individuals who are having life adversity.
I'm fascinated by that helmet thing. What did you say it was? Magnetic?
Transcranial magnetic stimulation.
And so that's something that people can come into your office, or some psychiatrist. Is this readily available?
It is available. It's available. It is approved by the FDA, by the Food and Drug Administration, and it is available in psychiatrists' offices. And we are actively working even on a solution where that treatment could be administered at home also. So in the next few years, there's going to be solutions where transcranial magnetic stimulation is going to be provided at home also.
Wow, that's fantastic. So all of this work that you were doing, right? This early research and chemistry and all these other things was like early 2000s, and then you
Yes.
decided that there ought to be a way to, maybe you could kind of talk about this telepsychiatry, what your thoughts
Sure,
were, and how that came about,
Absolutely.
because that had lots of impact not only on people but down the road to your story. So
Yes,
why don't you
yes.
kind of give us a little bit of background on how that came about at this time?
So following my work at the National Institute of Mental Health, I moved to Pennsylvania, where I live right now. I live in Easton, Pennsylvania, which is a rural area in Pennsylvania. We are about an hour and 30 minutes northwest of Philadelphia. We're probably about an hour west of New York City. But we are just a rural area, kind of middle Pennsylvania, where there's a lot of rural communities. There's not a lot of access to physicians. There's not a lot of access to medical care. And we see that patients sometimes go without medical care because they have no access to a psychiatrist or a primary care doctor. So when I moved in 2006 to Pennsylvania, I figured out that I should, because of my mission at the National Institute of Mental Health, I figured out that I should be able to provide a lot of my psychiatric services to people in rural areas. And that prompted me to collaborate with multiple universities to be able to provide those services through video conferencing. And these days, video conferencing, Zoom, and other video conferencing and FaceTime, these are done with very simple. You got a phone, you're able to basically do that. It's a small thing. But in 2006, the telemedicine, telehealth equipment weighed about 1,000 pounds. And it was big screens. There was no big screen TVs. There was just big screens that were thick and required separate connections. But I was able to connect the emergency rooms of multiple hospitals together. So I would be able to provide services to a lot of individuals who were suffering from psychiatric problems while I was at a central location. And I didn't have to travel. They didn't have to travel to come to see me. I was able to provide these services through a connection like this, through a telehealth connection. And that was the beginning of it in 2006. We connected 3 hospitals. And the experience was so fascinating that I also worked with physicians who were working in the intensive care unit. And we established one of the country's first tele-ICU. So this was in 2008. So basically, one physician sat in a central location, and he was able to manage a lot of individuals who were critically ill, who were in an intensive care unit, who were on a ventilator, and the one specialized physician would connect to different ICUs, intensive care units, and help nurses and other doctors manage these patients. So not only were we prepared when COVID hit in 2020, it wasn't just telehealth and telepsychiatry, it was tele-ICU. I was fortunate that I had my name, my imprint on the beginning of that field. And so when COVID hit and they needed to have so many people who were affected by COVID in an intensive care unit, it was that system that was there, that was deployed very quickly, very easily to ramp up capacity, to have as many people in the intensive care unit be managed by a specialist. And they really needed to be managed by a specialist because COVID ravaged their lungs, and they needed somebody who was an expert in managing lung disease to be able to ensure that they survived COVID. And I am proud, and I pride myself on the fact that I contributed to the establishment of this tele-ICU systems that later on saved a lot of lives.
Oh, that's wonderful work. And, I think particularly younger people now, right, if they hear telepsychiatry, they don't think about the early days of it, right? So they think, oh, yeah, so I could just get on my phone, kind of do a video conference, and they don't really appreciate, I think, what it was back then. And it was through hospitals at that time, right? Because that's really the only way, nobody at home was going to have all this equipment. So you had to kind of go that route. So it seems like everything is in place that should be welcomed by various bodies of regulatory agencies or whatever. But at somewhere along the line, something happened, right? And you got kind of pulled in by the federal government. So that was one of your big trials as a professional. Can you talk about how that came about, what happened, and
Sure.
and all the
Sure.
probably all the emotions and fears and things that went through your mind?
Absolutely, absolutely. It was that pioneering work that actually produced very positive results, measurable results. We saved lives, and the government likes saving money. I mean, that's what they do. So we saved lives, we saved money for the government, and when COVID hit, basically the telehealth field just exploded, and we went from just a few people who were doing telehealth, like myself, into now everybody in the field was doing telehealth. And when the government has that, they want to ensure that everything is done in a compliant fashion, that people don't break the rules. And unfortunately, I just came under the attention of the government as one of the pioneering people who did telehealth. And they wanted to teach people a lesson, and I was targeted. To this day, I don't know why I was targeted. I have my thoughts about it, but I was targeted, and I wrote about that in my book, Doctor Not Guilty. But I was ultimately targeted because I was a pioneering person who's done work on telehealth and telepsychiatry. And the government did not agree with basically the way I did my work, even though I was the one who wrote the book on how to do telehealth and telepsychiatry work. Some parts of the government did not agree with that. The United States Department of Justice did not agree with that. And ultimately, in November of 2022, an indictment for healthcare fraud came by because of misperception of my services and some faulty statistics and data that the government had about my services. And knowing that I've done everything the right way, that I was compliant with all rules and regulations, knowing that I've done everything conscientiously, and that I wanted to ensure compliance with all rules and regulations, some of which the government didn't understand, I decided that I wanted to go to trial, and I wanted to explain my case and how I did my services to a jury of my peers and neighbors, and see what they think about the services that I provided. And but this was a very, very stressful experience, and things were difficult.
Yeah, I can only imagine. There's a whole lot of emotions that would be going through. You're risking your jail time, your licensing, your livelihood, taking care of your family, all those things. And I'm imagining that they had probably offered you some sort of plea deal or something, but you wanted to fight this because you were convinced you were innocent, right? So how did you kind of come to that conclusion, that decision, manage your own emotions during that time to keep things together? Can you talk about some of the strategies that you use, some of the things that you've learned,
Sure.
over the years to go into this legal battle?
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, it's very important to tell your audience about the statistics. So, of those who face federal or even state legal charges, the majority of people will plea. Basically, they will admit to guilt, and they will submit to basically admitting in a plea deal that they are guilty, and they think that the crimes that the government or the state government, the federal government or the state government that's accusing them of committing these crimes, that they have committed these crimes, and that basically they agreed with the government version of events. More than 95 to 97% of people will plead. So that leaves us with about only 2 or 3% of people that will decide to go to trial. And out of those, less than 20% are found not guilty. Out of those who go to trial. So my chances with going to trial and being found not guilty was 1 in 1,000. These are the odds that I was facing, and understanding some of those odds is very important for people. But when you have a conviction that you basically did everything right, and that basically you're going to work your best to show the results of your work, that you have done everything the right way, and be able to convince the juries that you were not guilty. Another part of that experience is the fact that I had actually been a expert witness in criminal trials. I had testified in criminal trials as an expert witness, evaluating individuals that actually had psychiatric problems, and explaining to juries that these individuals who were charged with crimes had psychiatric problems, and some of their psychiatric problems may have contributed to their criminal action. And on several situations was able to have these individuals who are accused with criminal offenses, sometimes capital criminal offenses, to convince juries that these individuals were suffering from severe psychiatric illness that contributed to their criminal behavior, and ultimately be able to help juries spare these individuals' lives and remand them to maybe a psychiatric facility for the rest of their lives to receive treatment as opposed to a capital punishment. So I was prepared. It was, as I say, it's divine intervention, it's divine redirection that prepared me. My childhood adversity, childhood events that happened in my life, my research, my work on telehealth, my legal experience, all kind of coalesced together to prepare me for what came, the Goliath of the government of the United States against Muhamad Aly Rifai.
Yeah, there's so much we can delve into to this a little bit. How long did the trial last?
So the trial happened in the last days of April 2024 and ended on May 9th, 2024. So it lasted about 6 days. And May 10th is actually my birthday. So
Oh, wow.
basically the day before my birthday was the jury's verdict.
So from the time the indictment came down to the time of your acquittal, how much time was that?
It was about 18 months. It was about 18 months. One of the most difficult 18 months of my life.
So,
Basically,
so during those 18 months, were you able to continue practicing or
I was able to continue to practice. Yes, I was able to continue to practice. The government basically only had this as a billing disagreement, even though they charged it as a criminal offense. This was a billing disagreement. The government says that our billing was not correct, that it was fraudulent, that our services were fraudulent. We said no, we disagree. And so I was able to maintain my licensure. I was able to continue to see patients with Lord's help. And basically, I returned to seeing patients after this trial was concluded.
so since that has happened, how has that shaped where you're going now? So that whole experience, you talked about reform and some of those things. How does that play into what you are doing now and the work you're trying to do now?
So basically, with the trial, I was able to delve into the belly of the beast, the federal criminal system, and even the state criminal system, where the majority of defendants plea. Basically, they have no chance of utilizing the jury trials. I found out that only probably 2 to 3% of cases go to trial, and out of those, a very small minority are found not guilty because the odds are stacked against you. Even if you decide to go to trial, the odds are stacked against you in terms of evidence, in terms of the jury, in terms of lawyers, in terms of judges and prosecutors. Unless you know the system very, very well, your chances of coming through on the other side are not very good. 1 in 1,000, as I said. So I decided after my experience, I wrote my book, Dr. Not Guilty, which basically introduces some of the people who are lay people who don't know the federal criminal system into these concept of what happens when somebody gets indicted. And people can read those chapters where I talk about the federal criminal system and your chances of surviving that system. I decided to start a service called SHIELD, Support and Help in Ethical Legal Defense. And we have a website, shield.expert. And basically, I help individuals who are facing severe legal problems persevere and go through their legal problems and legal issues, and help them come on the other side victorious, or even if they have consequences, help them be able to limit their exposure and come out on the other side with the least possible adverse outcomes that happens to them, to their family, to their business, to their community, and use some of my experience as learning experience and some of the things that I did to help them cope with the legal problems that they are facing.
And that organization again was called Shield. Is that what it was?
Shield, SHIELD .expert. We have a website, www.shield.expert.
So, as I go out in the world and interview more and more people and all that, it's amazing how many people have taken times of adversity and used that as fuel for something good, to something, to help other people and better other people. And this is another example. How do you go about explaining the motivation there? Because it's one thing to say, oh, there ought to be something, but to then take that and go, I'm going to start it. I mean, that's a whole nother ball game. What is it, do you think, that from your mindset from early days that led you to take that adversity and go, here's a solution. I'm going to actually do something about it, versus just, well, boy, somebody should do something about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that I tell people, when you are facing adversity, you need to know that you need to plot your path. So I tell this story, and I tell it in my book, that when I was first facing adversity, when I was facing the legal problems, as with everybody, you have to know the possible ultimate consequences. So when my chances of prevailing in a federal criminal trial is 1 in 1,000, I have to know that one of the outcomes is actually going to jail. That was one of the outcome. I mean, could be for any reason. Maybe the jury wouldn't like me. They wouldn't like how I'm dressed. Maybe they don't like how I look. Maybe they don't like my lawyer. Maybe they don't like one of my witnesses, and kind of something will set them off. And that may be an adverse outcome for me. So actually, a few weeks prior to the trial, I drove to the federal prison where I would likely go if I had God forbid, got convicted. That the jury found me guilty for some reason. It's like, okay, this is where I would go. I am prepared. I am at peace. So preparing yourself for all the possible outcomes, I think, is very, very important. People don't think that's, well, how is it that you went to the jail to see how the jail is? Well, prepare yourself. This is like when if you're somebody who's preparing yourself for a journey, you save money for fuel, you prepare yourself, you prepare food, you prepare things that you're going to need. And one of the things was to know that that there was a possibility that I was going to be in this jail. And that basically, if I was in this jail, I should be at peace of being there, that was one of the possibilities. So I drove there. It was a 2-hour drive. Is the federal penitentiary federal prison camp in Otisville, New York. I went there, took a look at it. Okay, I'm at peace. If this is one of the outcomes, I'm ready. I'm ready for that. But also, that kind of prepares you for the fact that you want to be able to go through with this and persevere, knowing the possible outcomes that could happen. I think was very, very important. And I've always been somebody who prepares for all possible outcomes and have contingency plans for everything.
Several times in our conversation, you've also mentioned faith, divine providence, and all that. So it seems like that has obviously been an important part. And I've argued for a long time that human beings, can't live without faith. The question really becomes, what are you putting that faith or that trust into? But we all put it in something. Some people it's science, some people it's human institutions, and others of us it's a higher power, it's God, it's the universe, it's something outside of ourselves and outside of human control. It certainly seems like you have a pretty strong faith upbringing. Can you talk about how that has helped you in these situations and how you think it helps people in general?
Sure, sure. So, I mean, we definitely know that faith, and I actually give lectures about this. We know that faith works. We know that faith and prayer has a positive outcome on health outcomes. So actually, there was a large medical trial where they actually looked at the outcome of individuals who prayed for themselves, who were having surgery. And they compared them to individuals who were having surgery that actually didn't pray for themselves. And a large number of individuals, and when they compared, they found that those who prayed for themselves actually had better outcomes. They stayed in the hospital for less number of days. They were able to return to work much easier, and they didn't have more complications from their medical treatment. There's also been studies actually on the fact that what happens when somebody else prays for you. So if you are having adversities, a health adversity or other adversity, and you ask other people to pray for you, the benefits are actually a little bit less. So if you pray for yourself, you may have better outcomes. If somebody prays for you, you may have better outcomes, but actually the improvement is much less. So a higher power, just by statistics, works. Prayer, meditation, seeking a higher power works in terms of outcomes. But also having a belief in yourself and having a belief on your abilities to overcome adversities. We humans have overcome adversities for a long time, and not having a belief in ourselves and just giving up, I think, is something that basically we can help with basically exercises, with meditation, with motivational material that can help people overcome adversities and go through difficult situations and come on the other side with positive outcome.
Yeah, so now you're talking exactly about the kind of things that I want to bring to young people in particular, but people in general. And the reason I say young people in particular is if they can develop some of these habits and learn some of these, what I call mindset tools, change some of their belief systems that they have that might be limiting them. When you can do that at a young age, like, wow, it gives you such better preparation for dealing with the storms of life, because they are going to come. They will hit you. And the mindfulness, meditation, prayer, exercise, even nutrition, um, the the positive affirmations, all of these things that people in the self-help field and all have talked about for generations work. They have incredible power, and that's becoming your own life coach. I think is something, and I use that term, with understanding that there are times that we need help be outside of ourselves. Complete understanding. Like you can't necessarily on your own solve all of your own problems because oftentimes we are at the source of the problem. But anyways, all these things that you've talked about are, it's something I don't know that enough people really fully grasp. They hear about it, but I'm not that sure they fully grasp the impact and power of building those into your life. I've often been fascinated by people who've gone through, like yourself, seeing some really traumatic things or experiencing it. And I've always come back to the Apostle Paul, and I don't remember what letter he wrote it in, but he said, "We rejoice in our suffering because the suffering produces perseverance, the perseverance character, and the character hope." And I kind of grabbed hold of that because rejoicing in our suffering is just like, it's hard sometimes to think about rejoice. Like life's hit me hard right now. It really kind of sucks. How can I rejoice in it? But the idea is that through it, I develop perseverance and ultimately hope. And without hope, what do we have? So, just lines like that from books of wisdom can have such a powerful impact. We are.
And I don't know if you know, but Apostle Paul is Syrian. He is from Syria.
Well, that there is so much too from that whole region. There's so many people and ideas and stuff that can lead to good, but sadly, it's so often it doesn't. Which, yeah. Anyways, that'll be for a conversation some other time. We can talk about all the psychology and associated with religion and all of that. I just may have to have you on another show because we didn't really get time to talk much about teenagers and families and education and so many other things that you and I can have a conversation about. So we may have to come back to that at some future time. For people who want to get in touch with you, I know you had mentioned that SHIELD organization thing, but is there a way to get in touch with you personally if people have questions or if they want to reach out or anything like that? Is there something that they can share, that you can share so people could find more about you?
Absolutely. So I do have a YouTube channel. It is called The Virtual Psychiatrist. I do have a website, drrifai360.com, where people can send me a message. They can reach out to me. They can contact me. And then shield.expert is our website for those individuals that need help and guidance if they're going through any adversity in life. It doesn't have to be legal. Support and help in ethical legal defense. So it could be legal, it could be a life adversity. We would help you with defending that. We would help you with coping through your stress. We would help you with basically overcoming adversity. And we have, it's not just the modalities that I do in terms of medications or transcranial magnetic stimulation. We have now newer modalities that we utilize. We utilize artificial intelligence, for example, that can help people cope with adversity and stress through meditation and biofeedback. So we utilize a modality called PRISM that can help people overcome adversity by retraining their brain to be able to focus, calm down through a artificial intelligence module that will help individuals overcome adversity. And I'm happy to provide that for individuals who are going through live adversities, and they can reach me for that training and come to my institute in Pennsylvania for that training and for that treatment.
This is fabulous stuff. I love the work you're doing. Greatly appreciate you being a guest on my show. And, we may have to continue this conversation sometime in the future. But thank you it was an honor to have you.
I am delighted to be able to talk to your audience.
Well, thank you. And for all you out there, as always, I hope you got as much out of the conversation as I do. I get so much out of these conversations. And as I've been offering over the last number of episodes, people who are interested in really talking about mindset and how it does play out into all the things that we had this conversation about, I would encourage you to reach out to me at coachchuck360.com and send me an email with your first and last name, or send me a text even, best email to reach you. And I will send you a special calendar link so there'll be no charge for a strategy session, and we can have a conversation, try to find out where you're at, what your goals are, where you might be in terms of your self-image and ability to deal with stress and mindset and all that. And, when we're done, I would kind of give you a roadmap, a blueprint, some ideas to try, some directions that you could head. And that would be a great way to kind of really get yourself grounded. The other thing I am asking people too is, if you know of anybody who brings in speakers, whether it's speakers for school programs or even summer camps or business groups, I'm always loving to come and share the importance and power of taking control of your mindset. So again, if you know of any opportunities, need a speaker, you can reach out to me at coachchuck360.com. And until the next episode, I wish you all well, and go out and live life to its fullest.